Oh, this hallowed ground, which laughter, memories, and knowledge abound. This hallowed ground, with arms flung wide open to embrace every child. The scared, the timid, the lonely, the happy, the hopeless, and the hopeful. This hallowed ground, which trembled on the difficult days and caught the sweat of a troubled brow. And this hallowed ground mourned the day that ugliness of white robes marched upon its soil. But then it clapped wildly when athletes and young musicians marched home with their brass trophies. Oh, this hallowed ground that whispers to the one called teacher and reminds you, you may be their only hope. This hallowed ground has endured, accomplished, succeeded, and withstood for over 100 years. This hallowed ground may be covered in brick, mortar, and rock, but it calls to you today with a charge as it whispers, press on, press on, press on. For it is you that will carry the legacy of this hallowed ground. There is one missing today that was here last year. And she's the one who told me I could write. So, Lisa Hanley, that's for you. Dr. George Washington Carver spoke from this very stage to the students of Hanley High School on January 25th, 1935. This remarkable man was born in slavery, but he became one of our nation's greatest scientists, maybe the greatest. The changes in our town and in our Roanoke City school system, along with the other school systems that have been a part of Roanoke, since that day cannot even be numbered. On this day in 1935, the general public was invited, and by 10 a.m., the auditorium, this auditorium, with Dr. George Washington Carver standing on that stage. Is that just exciting because I love history, or does that excite you to know that that dear man stood on the stage? By 10 a.m., the auditorium was filled, and the upper grades of the Roanoke Normal College, they were seated here. And then there was another school that was invited, thankfully, the Randolph County Training School, the school for the African Americans, and they were invited. They sat up there. And I don't know, I get chill bumps when I think about that day and about this day, and how things have changed for the better. And I wish that Dr. George Washington Carver could be here today and see the changes, see how far we have come. What a day that must have been, but little did they know that in 1971, all of the schools in Roanoke would be consolidated. And on that day, and on this day, we would remember them and their excellence to academics. So let's walk through some of the changes and see where our schools are today. I didn't know school. I walked with Ms. Caldwell, I think it was yesterday. All this has happened so fast, I don't even know what today is. But I walked with Ms. Caldwell over the grounds of Night in Love. Because of my passion and love for history, I don't ever really see what you see. I see what the pictures have shown me, and that I have studied, and I have sat on the front porches of those Mill Village people who still live there, heard their stories, and they don't romanticize it. It just was that way, wasn't it, Penny? It was just a beautiful time, a beautiful place. That school was built by William Henry Knight and Harvey Enlow. Harvey Enlow was the superintendent at the Hanley Mill, lived on the Mill Village, And Mr. W.H. Knight was a very prosperous man, and he was the president of the board of directors. And so between the two of those, that's where the name of the school, Knight Inlow School, comes. It was built between 1919 and 1920. It was actually ready in the fall of 1919. I think I told you this last year. The great influenza, as a result of World War I, was sweeping across the entire town, including Lowell. And so they waited until the mid part of January of 1920 to open the school. And this picture was made in the 1930s. And what you see there is the Hanley Mill baseball team, and they're playing on what was called the Lowell Diamond. They had a baseball field, and a quite nice one, on the Lowell Mill Village before the city of Roanoke came along. So Lowell was quite progressive. And that field now is covered up with buildings because that field holds Knight Inlow School. This is the way it looked then, and this is the way it looks now. The Knight Inlow School campus, as Ms. Caldwell fittingly called it, now consists of 5 independent buildings. Each one, and I think I covered them all yesterday. Each one is immaculate and awaiting this year's students. In 1971, whereas we picked up from last year, we ended last year by showing that the Roanoke County Training School, students from the Knight Inlow School, and students from Rock Mills after they completed 8th grade were coming here. But all of those schools consolidated into the Roanoke City school system, which is just a beautiful piece of history. And it does need to be written about. So in 1971, when all that happened, when Roanoke was reeling the closure of the Hanley Mill, and there was also a sewing plant that had just closed called Roanoke, unemployment skyrocketed in our little town to 24%. Fortunately, a new manufacturing business came to town called Butte Knit. In 1971, Hanley added 18 teachers to its staff. Can you imagine? Hanley was desegregated, and the population of the school increased at a pace that kept Superintendent Thomas Turner very busy, looking for more funds, looking for classrooms, looking to hire more teachers, which he did 18 at one time, and looking to build more buildings. It was the beginning of a great transformation of our Roanoke City school system. Knight Inlow School got a new lunchroom with a seating capacity of 150. Prior to that, Mrs. Moore, Bonnie Sue Knight's mother, and the Lowell Study Club, they had raised the money to build the first lunchroom at Knight Inlow School. And I think that was around 1952. So that lunchroom was about 20 years old. And so in the midst of all of that, Mr. Turner found the funds and the way to build a new lunchroom there. The little former middle school was now on its way. I don't have a picture, but there's one more story before we move away from that. We'd have to understand or study or maybe read my book about the social and the economic differences between the city of Roanoke and the Lowell Mill Village. That has consumed my thoughts and my writing for a couple of years. It was distinct. Just go over there and sit on the front porch of some of those and ask them what it used to be like. But I think that November of 1974 became a defining moment. And I don't know if you agree, but to me, based on what I have learned, when Nancy Caldwell, who grew up in the Lowell Mill Village, whose parents worked in the mill, when she won Miss Hallinan in 1974, I think that's a defining moment. And then she also became the head cheerleader for Hanley High School. Defining moments, just in the small ways. There were additions made in 1976 to Knight Inlow School. Moody Scroggins was a very popular principal at Knight Inlow School. I know he was there in the 77-78 school year. But this same year is when the very first state-mandated and funded kindergarten began in the state of Alabama. The very first kindergarten teacher in this program was Corinne Henson. Is Corinne here today? I spent about 45 minutes with her the other day, and when she began talking about this, I mean, she lit up like Christmas lights. It was just a beautiful memory, and I can almost see in her eyes the memories that she had of this. She was hired as the very first state-funded kindergarten teacher, and that was held at Roanoke School. She loved her students, and she could still call each one by name. She had a whole book of pictures, and she knew them all by name. She was completely free to create a learning environment for the first 20 children. And what they did, the city school system offered to people, if they wanted their child to be in this very first kindergarten, they could drop by the office and put their name in a bowl, and then they drew 20 names out. That's all they could do with that first year, was draw 20 names out. So they were picked, I guess, by a lottery drawing. Corinne devised a plan which included the letter people. They played dress up. They had time for reading and art, and they also had a home center. She taught them how to count, how to write their name, how to play together, and helped them to acquire social skills outside of their homes so to be ready for first grade. Before the class ever started, and this impressed me the most, on her own initiative, Corinne visited every single family at their home and got to know them and earn their trust before their little children ever came to her new kindergarten. They had a playground, and if you remember the old building, and if you remember the old Jehovah's Witness church that sat right behind the original Night-in-Law School off of East Avenue, it's a drop. There's just an embankment there, like it was at the Hanley Elementary School also. But that's where they played. That was the only place they had to go and play. And so they would rake leaves and then slide down the bank into the leaves. And sometimes they would rake a pine straw, determined by which season it was. But she found ways to teach them to earn their trust. There were additional buildings constructed there in 87 and 94. Ms. Caldwell told me an interesting story about the old building, the original building, 1920, that they were still having classes there. And there would be swarms of termites would all of a sudden appear. They would be swarming around the children's heads, and they would actually evacuate the building. And that's when it was time to tear down the beloved old Night-in-Law School. In 2004, Night-in-Law School teachers are still doing whatever it takes to make sure that their students are having fun and learning and experiencing all that they can conjure up in a day of school. Now, around back, Ms. Caldwell showed me that there's a burial ground. And this marker, we're not sure where it came from. I'm guessing it was on the side of a building at some point, but all of the students want to know who's buried there. It appears George Wallace. The remnants of the popular and beloved Ernest Hambrick is still there. I remember him. And I went down yesterday and touched where he had etched his name. And I believe it's 1974 that he had etched so that he would always be remembered. Mr. Hambrick, you're still around somewhere. You don't have to do that for us to remember you. He was quite a man. He and his wife Nellie gave many years to Night-in-Law School.